the creative journey. It's easy to get lost, but don't worry, you'll lift off. Sometimes you just need a creative pep talk.
Okay, we're going to talk about what do you do when you're just starting out, because we got a lot of beginners that listen to this show too, and as well as the seasoned folks. And even if you're a seasoned folk, you got to start over all kinds of things, all kinds of times. So we're always in that beginner mindset. So we're going to talk a little bit about what I think is really important if you're in one of those stages where you're starting something new. We're also going to talk about how do you stay focused, not just long enough to start something, but to finish something. As an ADHD person who has finished a few things, I have a lot of thoughts on that I hope will help you. These have been freshly helping me recently in a very important way. So I'm excited to get into some details around what really helps me stay motivated and start and finish things. And stick around to the end of this episode. We are going to do a CTA, our call to adventure, how to do something right now that's going to help you do this stuff. Not just be inspired, but do it. And it's called Date Yourself. Okay? Excited about that. Can't wait for you to get there. And yeah, let's get into it.
Hi, Andy. I'm Snigdha. I love your podcast, and this is me sending in a question for Dr. Pizza. I am kind of at the beginning of setting up my creative practice. I still have a full-time day job, and I'm just trying to see what this could mean for me on the side. And Creative Pep Talk has been a big inspiration for me to do that. So thank you very much. I was wondering if you had any tips for when you're at the beginning, you don't have a specific style yet, you don't know what exactly your medium is, and you just have all these different creative ideas of stuff you could make, stuff you could do coming to you way faster than you can possibly pick one and execute it and bring it to life. So when you're in that zone, how do you get started? How do you make sure you actually start the process and don't just let the ideas overwhelm you to the point of being frozen and not making anything at all? I was just thinking about that, and I would appreciate any thoughts, advice, anything that comes to your head. Thank you so much.
Hey, Snigdha, I am super excited to answer this question because I think it goes right alongside themes that we've been exploring in this show. We did an episode recently about how we talk a lot about the strategic side of creative career planning and creativity and kind of plotting and outlining and that kind of stuff, but we don't spend as much time on what we traditionally think of as creativity, which is the exploratory creativity. Strategic creativity being starting with an end in mind and kind of working backwards, and then exploratory creativity being starting without knowing where it's going. And when you are getting started, I think that this is the most essential time to be creating without a purpose, without knowing where this is going to go. What market is it in? How is this going to be profitable? I think you have to have a period of time early in your creative development where you are making not from a place of strategy, but from a place of exploration in terms of your taste. So when we think about the artists that we love, words that come to mind are creative voice or creative style or authorship. All these things are really important. But for me, I think that the first primary thing we should be focusing on in our creative journey is developing our creative sensibility. And I love this word sensibility. I think it's a through line throughout this whole podcast, and it's really essential to how I think about what it means to make great creative work and kind of find your way. I think the way that you navigate the creative journey is through your ability of your sensitivity, AKA your taste. And so taste is this word that I think means a lot of different things. I think when we think of taste, we think about good taste. We think about like refined palate. We think like, oh, this person likes good stuff and acquired tastes, and not so much guilty pleasures or things that we think are maybe less than creatively. But for me, I've tried to evolve my definition of taste to be purely your creative palate, your sensitivity to creative work. Like what lights up your taste buds. If you're a cook, that might mean literally, but if you're an artist, it means more symbolically or metaphorically, like your sensitivity on a heart level. What are the stories that make your heart soar? What are the songs that make you cry? What are the things that touch you deeply? That being touched that way is your sensitivity. And then when you create from that sensitivity, when you let that sensitivity guide you through the creative process, both inform the direction that you take as well as the decisions that you make through the process, that is the ability of that sensitivity. It is allowing you to taste the creation as you go and say, I need to go left. I need to go right. I need to add salt. I need to add a little paprika here. I need to do this or that to get closer to it lighting me up on the inside. And so to answer your question, that's just the preface, baby. To answer your question, I think you have to start with taste. You have to be trying to develop your sensibility, your ability of your sensitivity. And I think you do so by first collecting things that light you up in a visceral, transcendent way. We'll put it out there because we're both creative people. We don't mind getting a little romantic about it, right? Collect those things that really it's almost like a spiritual experience. And they should fall into the categories of, the acquired tastes, the bands and the artists and the books that you learn to love. Yeah, that's useful in your journey. But maybe more useful is the guilty pleasures, the stuff that you feel like I shouldn't even like this, but I can't help it. That tells you something really deeply true about your creative palette and your sensitivity. And so collect all this stuff, old stuff, new stuff, obscure stuff, all of it. Put it in a Pinterest board, create a collage of it, post it on your wall, cut it out of magazines, put it on your wall like you're a teenager, but get it all together in one place. Because the thing that you want to do is you don't want to separate all these this is the music taste. These are my film taste. These are the new artists I like. These are the old artists I like. You don't want them all separate. You want to get them together so that you can start seeing the commonalities. And when you look at that collage, I think what you're trying to see is there's these diagrams online that kind of show you, it's like a picture of a drawing of a tongue, and it shows you the different areas of taste. You have the salt and the sweet and the umami and something else and another thing. And these are all the little categories of the tastes and this is your taste profile. Those collages, that's what I want you to think of as your taste profile. It's like a big picture of your creative tongue, and you're trying to figure out what is overrepresented. Where am I really sensitive? Because you might have a sweet tooth, or you might not care for sweets and you're all about savory, but you have this very specific thing that comes together, this chemical combustion that makes you feel something. And so that's where influences are so much more than learning to make work that's inspired by them or kind of like them. The reason I think influences are so essential is because it tells you something about your sensitivity. And as you try to decode that, that's going to give you an idea of the types of work to start exploring. And in fact, you might even start critiquing these influences through the lens of, I love this artist, but I wish they had a little bit of that going on from this artist or that music or that film or that book or whatever. And you start to like pair all these ingredients together. And I have a friend, Lauren Hom, who is a chef and went to culinary school and also a great designer, lettering artist. And she spoke about this through the lens of like, when you can say that a recipe is yours, like legally in the cookbook world, is something like you have to change 3 key ingredients of a recipe for it to be yours. And so, real art, not that food and being culinary arts aren't a real art, but yes, they are arts, but art, fine art, illustration, whatever, that it doesn't work as specifically in that way. It's not as easy as just change 3 ingredients, but it gives you an idea of what it means to develop your own work, and doing so, not randomly picking things, not just randomly experimenting, which is just very haphazard, but trying to get closer and closer to that taste profile that doesn't exist except on your metaphorical creative tongue. And so what I would do is collect all that stuff, look for patterns. Those become constraints for a creative project that really is just you creating a creative habit, showing up, working in these ingredients for a period of time. For me, that looked like a daily drawing project where I did a new character every weekday for a year. That was me looking at these heroes, looking at the patterns, trying new combinations, trying to add other things, trying to critique, trying to experiment within that world. And then after I made that project, I had a much bigger sense of my sensitivity and what worked and what didn't. And I kind of was populating the world of my creative sensibility, like literally populating it with these characters, but also just populating it through items that the characters are holding and backgrounds, and trying to get a sense of what does this creative palette as a true north, as a compass, where does it lead me on a page as I'm making these decisions informed by these influences. But then as I'm drawing and as I'm reflecting on the drawings, figuring out which of these really, really light me up. And as I go to make decisions, letting that internal sensitivity guide each decision. When I had Lulu Miller from Radiolab on this show, she spoke about it like, moving the music on the podcast that she's working on and the radio show she's working on, moving the music here, moving it there, listening to it, closing her eyes. And she's talking about tasting that show with her soul and seeing which of them lights up that sensitivity and which of them maybe discuss that sensitivity. And like letting that internal taste bud guide each decision. I think that is the intuitive way that we do something that goes beyond rational thought, goes beyond something you can explain or teach, and it defines what will make your work unique to you. And so do that. And then, when I did this Color Me show, with my buddy Andrew Nyer, who is a conceptual artist and product designer, an illustrator. We did this in a way where we made this work, which was like a combination of our stuff. We did this mural. It was just like a doodle mashup. We stood back and we were like, what works and what doesn't work? And we made a bunch of rules and decisions about that based on our sensitivities. And this was our Venn diagram of our sensitivities. And then we said, okay, the next one we're going to do, it's going to be much more simple. We're just going to do objects kind of floating in space like a sticker sheet. And again, it was like us populating the world with, this is what a shoe looks like in that world. This is what a pencil looks like in that world. This is what a head looks like in this world, until we developed our own creative sensibility together, almost like how a band will do. And so that's kind of what you're doing, but just for yourself. And so collect that stuff, look for the patterns, make the work, reflect on it. And then once you have a sense of that sensibility, then you're going to have a much easier time knowing where that should go in the industry and the market and what makes your niche your niche. That's where the strategy starts coming in. I think we did this episode recently. We're talking about you got to get everything out. Like it's really hard to price how valuable a storage unit is if you can't get in there and like root around and see like what's actually in here. And they do that on that reality TV show, Storage Wars, where they try to bid on a storage unit that's up for sale because the person didn't pay for it before they can actually get in there, just kind of judge it from the outside. And we try to do that with art, but we don't need to do that. We can get it out. We can put it on a page. We can step back from it. Then we can start thinking a little bit more creatively strategic in terms of career or what kind of projects we should do. And so that's what I would do. Create a creative habit, exploring your sensitivity, developing your sensibility, populating your world a little bit. And then you can kind of see, like when I did that, the logical kind of next step would have been like to go into character design, but I didn't really want to do that. That didn't actually fit with the types of work that I was making. That might have been what I jumped to before I did that project, when I was just looking at the patterns. But once I got it all out, I thought, oh, actually this makes more sense to like write stories with these characters. So like picture books and chapter books and that kind of stuff. But I can only know that until after I've got it all out. So that's what I would do. I think you need to do an exploratory project that develops that creative sensibility. Okay, our next question is, how do you stay focused? Now, this is a weird question because you're asking someone with attention deficit disorder how to stay focused. So I'm assuming that you aren't the type of neurotypical person who finds focus easy, and that's why you're going to someone disordered around focus and attention to ask this question. Because although, yes, I do have ADHD and focus is a serious problem for me, I have in some way hacked myself in such a way that I have been able to focus on some things long enough to finish them. I've published over 10 different books, I think. Again, I don't focus enough to count them, but I've done a lot of books. I've done a lot of client work, and I built a career doing all these things. I've made over 500 episodes of this podcast, which is a hell of a lot of focus. So I have learned how to focus a little bit. And I'll tell you just one thing that I think has really helped me, and it's the reason why right now my iPhone wallpaper is quite bizarre. It's a headline of a Substack written by a graphic memoirist named Kelsey Ervick. And she wrote a Substack recently, and the title was something like, "Is the answer to all creative problems a deadline?" And I screenshotted it and I made it my background because it's something that I have had to keep top of mind recently, because I've realized so many of the projects that I want to do that I haven't done or haven't finished are because I don't have a deadline. And I'll break down, I want to say kind of two different things here. One is how I've learned to start and finish things, how I've found the motivation to start and finish things. And I found that motivation from two different places. And it's essential for me getting anything done. And it's come from understanding myself. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. The second thing I want to talk about is I've lost focus. Just as I'm saying that, I'm trying to remember what the second thing was. I'm giving you a little peek behind the curtain because usually I just cut this bit out while I'm trying to think of like, what was that second thing that I was going to bullet point? But I'm going to keep it for the sake of the question. The second thing I'm going to talk about is, I don't know, but we'll probably get there in a second. The first thing, I'll go back to that. This is the live version of my focus and attention. So when it comes, here's what I've learned about finishing projects and focusing long enough to achieve anything, is that motivation doesn't just mean one thing. First of all, you're not either motivated or you're not motivated. Also, when I've learned about ADHD, I've learned that what motivates ADHD people is a very different thing than what motivates neurotypical. Now, you might think of yourself as ADHD. You might think I might have ADHD, but I choose not to identify that way, or I find that as a limiting identity or a fixed mindset, or you might be autistic or dyslexic or any other, there's so many different types of brains. Is there even really a neurotypical? Some researchers think no. But back to the point, you may have similarities. So either you might be motivated in a similar way to me and to ADHD people, or the takeaway for you is to figure out what kind of motivation works for you and to systematize it. So my system is that I'm only going to start things that are triggered by interest, because there's only a few things that motivate ADHD people. The two that I utilize most often are interest-based motivation. So a nervous system that is interest-based and motivated by interest and curiosity. That's one of the ways that I am motivated. And the second way that I'm very familiar with is urgency. So if it's not interesting or it's not urgent to do this, I'm going to have a really difficult time getting that thing done. And so how this manifests in my creative life is I start things out of interest, knowing that at some point, especially depending on how large of a project this is, at some point, the interest is going to dissipate the second I commit to starting it. It's like sand in an hourglass. It's going to start to dissipate almost instantaneously, drip by drip by drip, sometimes in huge ways, sometimes just in tiny ways over time. But I know this interest is not a sustainable fuel from the start of the project to the end of the project. And so, because I've started so many things that I didn't finish, but the ones that I did finish were the ones that I was able to hack my brain with a sense of urgency. And usually that's done by a deadline. Sometimes I can get myself to commit to a deadline, and the deadline to myself or to the accountability of the audience. Like I said, I was going to do this podcast every Wednesday, or I'm going to post this picture every day. As long as I'm still pretty interested, and I can be accountable to that kind of a deadline. But the urgency really only kicks in for me if there is a more substantial obligation that I feel obliged to fulfill. Now, with work, the best case scenario is there's a lot of money attached to it, and I got to pay my bills and take care of my kids, and all of that feels like real urgency because it is. Another one, though, even when I haven't been able to do that. So sometimes, like the reason I've screenshotted that idea of is the answer to every creative problem a deadline. The reason I've screenshotted that recently is because I've realized there are a few different areas in my creative life where I've forgotten that the way that I finish ideas is having that urgency, having that deadline, hacking my brain that way. And I've tried to write books without a book deal. I've tried to create a course without a collaborative partner that's setting up the project and giving me deadlines and holding me to it. I forgot that this is such an essential part to not starting things, but finishing things. And as I move forward, when I try to do a book about the stuff we talk about on this podcast, I realized, I actually need to go get a book deal. I need to create the pitch, then I can get the book deal, and then that will hold me accountable to hack that second type of motivation that I need to finish something and follow through. But there are times when you don't have the option to get a book deal. There were lots of times in my creative journey, and maybe still, who knows if I'll get this book deal, but there were a lot of times where that wasn't even on the table. And even then, I would find ways to hack it. I'll tell you two versions of that. One was I wanted to make courses for podcast content for a long time, couldn't get myself to do it. Then Skillshare came along and wanted to advertise on the show, and I made it part of the deal that I would only do it if they would help me make courses. And so I knew that they were going to give me that deadline, that urgency, that motivation to get this thing started or mostly finished. And so even though I was going to sacrifice a portion of the profit of that to this collaborator, I knew that sacrifice was worth it because there would be zero profit if I was trying to do it on my own because it wouldn't exist. And so that's a way in which I have traded money for staying motivated, for accountability, for getting that urgency motivation that's necessary for me to complete stuff. Now, even if you don't have someone that you could just literally pay to motivate you with this kind of thing, maybe you're not even there. It's looked like before this, it's looked like doing projects with collaborators that are stronger finishers than they are starters. And so all the way back into the beginning of my career, making zines with friends in college and creating these collaborative partnerships, so much of that was, yes, we are excited about the same thing and I'm pumped to start this, but they're pumped to follow through. They're the people that want to finish it. And so there's a collaborative give and take there. When I make stuff with Sophie, that's a huge part of our deal is that she is a strong finisher. If we start something strong, she's going to want to finish it strong. And that's part of the deal. So collaborators can be a part of getting that urgency motivation. So those two things, if I don't have both of those in tandem, I'm not able to both start and finish a project. And so that might not be you. You might not be ADHD, but what you are is a human with preferences, and your nervous system and your motivation has a formula. It has a way to work with it. And so if those things don't ring true to you, I recommend going and checking out, I believe it's Gretchen Rubin's work on motivation, where she goes through, this isn't going to give you everything you need, but it's going to give you a piece of it, where she goes through, you're either a rebel or an obliger, or this or that. There's 4 categories of things that keep you motivated. Though all those things are factors. This is actually, just to go on a little bit of a tangent, since we are talking about ADHD, this is a little bit about why I go so hard on talking about ADHD, talking about neurodivergence. I think a lot of people assume that's because learning I was ADHD changed my life, which is true. That's true. That's why I talk about it all the time. But I think they assume that it changed my life because I got diagnosed and then I got on medicine and everything was fixed. I'm not on medicine, baby. I don't know if you can tell, but this guy's freewheeling. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to give you I don't even have an opinion on whether you should be on medicine. I have no opinion. I know some people that are, and it seems to have been really great for them. I have experience with medication, and I have the tests that say medication like this, of this nature, doesn't go well with my system, and it didn't. And so I'm not medicated. But the reason why finding out that I was ADHD changed my life is not through the lens of seeing it as a disorder, which it's ADHD, attention deficit hyperactive disorder. But I don't look at it that way. I look at it as a type of, even though it does come with significant challenges in the world that we find ourselves in, I look at it as a neurodivergence, meaning this is a different type of brain, not a disordered type of brain. And the body of work surrounding what we know about these types of brains that we call ADHD has been incredibly important to not working against my brain, but working with it. And so what I would say is, yeah, go check out the Gretchen Rubin thing. If the ways that I stay motivated resonate with you, use those. But if not, go find any information you can about the type of brain that you think that you have. And I would recommend not seeing it through the lens of disorder primarily, even though some of that may help you. And some of that might affirm what's challenging for you. And I get that. But I would primarily think about it through the lens of, this is what's different about me, and how do I work with that? And so I think the real hack for finding focus isn't, I'm attention deficit, so I can't focus. That's not true. Just what helps you focus and what motivates you is different than neurotypical. And what the neurotypical idea is that even if it's just 51% of the population is wired this way, we're going to create our system because that's going to serve the most people that we can. And so the school system is going to be set up with a type of motivator that works with the most people, hopefully, or at least the people that were in charge of making it, which is a whole other argument. But that's what I would say. Go check out the Gretchen Rubin thing. Hope some of this stuff that I do helps, and figure out what does help you focus, because you might have to do it in a different way. And just while I'm on it, why not? We'll go here. I have to apply this to how I have discipline whatsoever. So for me, a lot of people, I've talked to you about James Clear's Atomic Habits on this show, and we talk a lot about creative discipline. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to go into this. I want to make a whole other episode about this, and so stay tuned for that. Sorry to be teasing you with it, but I want to talk a little bit more about the oxymoron that is creative discipline, but also why it's completely essential to any types of creative fulfillment, success, or realizing any creative potential. It's an oxymoron because creativity is doing different things. Discipline is doing the same thing. How the heck do you do those at the same time? I actually think I have some experience with that. So I'm going to do an episode about that. If that's something you want to hear about, let me know. Hit me up on the comments on Instagram, YouTube, what have you, and I will make that episode. But I do think I'm going to work on that because I think I have something maybe useful to say, at least to past me. Okay. And when I say past me, I mean me 30 minutes ago who already forgot this stuff. And 3 years ago. Anyway, I hope that helps you find some focus. All right, we try to end every episode with something you can do right now instead of just feel motivation or inspiration doing something with it. So this week, your call to adventure, your CTA is date yourself, okay? Date yourself, not like, oh, this really dates me because I like pogs. That's not what we're talking about. We're saying take yourself on a date. I came up with 3 questions related to the stuff we talked about today that you could ask yourself on a date with yourself as an artist. I think what this gets at a little bit is you've probably heard me on this show, if you've listened very much, talk about why I think one of the most essential things to being an artist is loving yourself, caring about who you are. Why would anyone listen to your music if you won't? Why would anybody listen to you if you won't? You have to listen to you. You have to care. You have to be interested enough in your thoughts and feelings and experiences enough to inquire about them and put them out into the world. You have to think that there's something decent or interesting or worthwhile in order to get that out of you. And I would say if you're not interested in you, then get interested in something first, because maybe you're a young pup who isn't that interesting and you just need to be in a season of time where you're interested enough to get interesting, to have interesting thoughts and feelings, but you have to love yourself enough to give yourself that space and time. And so in the spirit of loving yourself and developing a relationship, a positive relationship with yourself, let's date ourselves. And here's the 3 questions that I think you should go get a coffee with yourself and ask yourself these 3 questions, and you can journal about it. First one is about the first question we had, which was about creative sensibility and why I think if you're just starting out, you need to really double down on your taste and getting to know what your taste is and being able to learn how to get in touch with that and let it inform your decisions. And so the first question I have here is, in 2025, what has been the most positively visceral reaction that you've had to a creative piece of work? First of all, not a bad date question if you really are going on a date with someone else. I find this to be an interesting topic. I just went out with the boys, had a couple brewskis, had 2 stouts, got sick to my stomach, just to give you too much information. But that was one of the things I throw out there sometimes because I find it really interesting. What is a song or a movie or a TV show or a video game or a piece of art or a comic, whatever, a podcast episode, that you listen to and it just freaking hit you on a visceral level? I'll tell you 2 of mine just to give you an example, and because I like to talk about it because I really love these things. One, and I love these things, and I love this quote by Mike Mills where he's a filmmaker and used to be a graphic designer. And he said, if he's stuck, he will just think about the art that he loves just to get in. I really think it helps you hack into that right hemisphere of your brain. And the last question, I know I'm jumping all over the place. My ADHD is up because I just got off of a coffee date with a friend, and that always puts me in this zone. And the third question I'm going to ask about is about the summer season, what you need right now. And for me, what I really need is getting in that right hemisphere of my brain, that creative side that remembers why I love art. And Mike Mills would say, focus, just bring to mind the things that you love that are art in the truest sense of the word, where it has this visceral feeling that'll help you get in touch with that side of you. And so that's the other reason I'm going to bring it up, because why not? I want a little time to get into that zone. Two things. One, I've probably mentioned on the show a couple times, Cameron Winter, huge fan of this musician, might not be for you. It's probably why I like it. And the second part of this question is, what hit you viscerally? And then what does it tell you about your taste? And me being so struck by this musician, Cameron Winter, he did a solo record. He's the front man of the band Geese. But that record, his solo record, hit me so hard. And a big part of it is that the singing is just hilariously bizarre. The music is like kind of classically fantastic, but the singing is just funny to the point of being absurd at times. And I just absolutely love it. And and what it says about my taste is what I remember the Talking Heads guy, David Byrne, saying. He said, the better you sing as a musician, the harder it is for me to believe what you're saying. And I so relate to that. If I hear pitch perfect, note perfect music, singing, you're thinking about singing. You're not thinking about the meaning of the song. And so that says something about my taste, which is I need the imperfections, because it really humanizes it for me. And I'm a big fan of the musician Indigo D'Souza, because more than anybody I know making music right now, when she sings, she sounds like she means what she's saying. And I can't believe how important that is to me. So authenticity is huge for my sense of taste. So that's what it's telling me about my taste. I also heard an interview with Stephen West on the Tim Ferriss podcast. Stephen West is the longtime creator, maker of the podcast Philosophize This. That I was just viscerally obsessed with. So ask yourself, in 2025, what have you been viscerally obsessed with? If you don't have an answer, I'm telling you right now, you need to open yourself up. You need to risk trying things that you don't like because you've gotten too static. You've gotten too stagnant is a better word. You need to go try some things that you don't know if you're going to like them or not. And a lot of those you probably won't like, but it's probably time to open up a bit. All right. Second question on this date is, when do you feel motivated to start something? And when have you felt motivated enough to finish something? I've already answered mine, so I won't go on a huge rant there, so you don't have to listen to that. But yes, what usually gets you to start something, but more importantly, what gets you to finish something? When have you felt that motivation or been motivated enough to get past the finish line? The third question on this date is, what do you need most in this season of your life? And it could be in the season of this year, the summertime, could be just the season that you find yourself in, for me, late 30s. What do I need right now? We're going to do a whole episode about this and about seasonality that I'm going to record maybe right after this, about the summer and what I feel like I need right now. But this can get you thinking about it. What do you feel like you need most? Number one, not number two, not number three. We all have a million priorities and things we have to do. But what is the thing that you, as an artist, as a human, more importantly, as a human, what do you need to be regulated, to be healthier, what is the most pressing need? I think that's an interesting question, and we're going to get a little bit more into that. soon. All right. I hope this was super helpful for you. I hope it was motivating, inspiring to see me get really ADHD and excited about this stuff. For people that watch on YouTube, you notice that between question 1 and 2, I got a haircut. So that was kind of weird. I'm addressing that just so you don't think you've lost it. But also, when I mentioned that we have a YouTube channel now where these are, there's absolutely no pressure to listen or watch on YouTube. We're going to make this always audio first. But I just know a lot of ADHD people in particular, neurodivergent people really love YouTube and like that as an option. So I let you know about it just so you know that it's an option in case you prefer that. I flip back and forth all the time now on podcasts, whether I put them on. If I'm going to be sat at a desk, I might put it on a side screen and let it play visually in the background. But I like the option to listen as I go and have it as a companion medium, washing the dishes, mowing the lawn, all that kind of thing. So we do both for your preference. And thanks for listening. Thanks to Sophie Miller for being the editor and producer, co-producer. Don't get ahead of yourself. I'm also there. Connor Jones of Pinning Beautiful for the audio, video edits, sound design, and animations. Huge thanks to Yoni Wolf of the band Y for our theme music. And until we speak again, stay pepped up.